Hi guys. Haven't done a video in a really long time. I had baby Carter, as a lot of you know. I had him about 2.5 weeks ago. He's 2 weeks and 2 days old today, so it's been really overwhelming and I haven't really had time to sit down and do a video, but I'm here now, so I'm going to tell you my labor and delivery story. So he is he's 2 weeks and 2 days old. October 5th, which was a Monday night at about 11 o'clock at night, I started having contractions, and at first I wasn't really sure if they were contractions. It felt like diarrhea pains, like you would have if you're having diarrhea, like that urgent cramping feeling, and it felt like that with a mix of menstrual pains. So that would like come and go. So I wasn't sure if it was really contractions or not, but they would come and go maybe every 10 minutes or so. Eventually it got to the point where I like couldn't breathe. I would have to stop and be like, ooh, it really, really hurts. Like I'd have to stop what I was doing. Well, we decided it was probably contractions. So we started trying to time them, which was hard. It's hard to time contractions. We didn't really know how to do it. So we weren't sure if they were 2 minutes apart or 5 minutes apart, but whatever they were, it was about 1 a.m. and we were like, well, we live about 45 minutes from the hospital. Maybe we should go ahead and start getting there just so I don't deliver at our house. So at about 1 o'clock, 1 in the morning, we went to the hospital. Neither of us had slept at all. And I got there and I was still having contractions. They were a lot worse when I was walking than when I was laying down. They checked to see how dilated I was. They hooked me up to the machine and checked to see how dilated I was. I was 4 centimeters dilated, I think like 80% effaced or something, 80 to 90% effaced. And my contractions were really irregular. They were like anywhere from 10 minutes apart, 5 minutes apart. They were just not very regular. But they really, really hurt. Like I couldn't function. I would have, like when they came, I would have to lay there and just not talk. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope, like I couldn't imagine it getting any worse. So the nurse came in and said, you're having contractions, you're only 4 centimeters. Usually at this point we send most people back home to labor at home, and then you come in later when you're more dilated. Well, how would we know if I'm more dilated or not? And second of all, we live really far away. So at that point I was really desperate to not be sent home. I wanted to stay there at the hospital where I felt more safe. So she's like, well, we could either send you home right now, or we have you walk around the halls for an hour and see if you get any progress, and then come back and we'll see if you're more dilated. So Matt walked with me for an hour around the hall. It was about the smallest hall you could ever imagine, like back, forth, one little detour, back, forth. And that was like a form of torture. It hurt so bad to walk around with contractions. I could not, like every time one came, I had to stop. I had to hold on to Matt, and my knees got really weak, and I just couldn't breathe. But we were timing them in the hall, and they were exactly 2.5 minutes apart while I was walking around in the hall. So after an hour of that passed, we came back and I laid in the bed, and they checked to see how dilated I was. I was sure I would be more dilated, and we were like, yes. We came back and we were like, the contractions are definitely 2.5 minutes apart now. I was still only 4 centimeters, but I was in a lot of pain. So I asked the nurse if I could maybe be induced and have an epidural, because you're allowed to have an epidural at 4 centimeters, but they weren't saying anything about it. They came back, I guess they talked about it with my doctor, and they came back and said that they could give me some morphine to help me take the edge off the contractions, and let us go lay in a dark room for about 4 or 5 hours and try to sleep, and then come back and check and see how dilated I was. So this was about 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so I of course I asked if the morphine was okay for the baby. They said, yeah, it's totally safe. It would just make him a little drowsy, but he'll be fine. which when you're having painful contractions, like, as long as it's safe for the baby, I would have done whatever it took to make it feel better, because I was like crying. So we went and laid in the dark, like, room for 4 hours. I didn't sleep. Matt slept a little bit. I felt really bad for him. They stuck him on like the tiniest little chair, and we were so tired, but I couldn't sleep because every time I would start to feel a little tired, my contraction, the morphine didn't really take the edge off that much. It just made me feel like a little bit less stressed out and angry. I was so angry and upset because things weren't happening and we had to wait even more. And after that, I guess around like 8 a.m., somebody finally came and checked. Oh, did you hear the baby? And checked to see how dilated I was, and I think I was 5 centimeters and 90% effaced or something. So they're like, all right, let's go ahead and admit you into labor and delivery part. Like, you can go to the labor and delivery room, let's go. And so at that point, everything started happening really fast. Well, sort of fast. People were coming in with papers for me to sign, and it was finally happening. I was getting really excited. I got taken to the labor and delivery part of the labor and delivery room. They came in and said, do you want your epidural now? And I was like, yes, definitely. So I guess around 9 or 10 a.m. I finally got, because things happen kind of slower, and they have to find people to give epidurals. And so around 9 or 10 a.m., they gave me my epidural, which was cake. I highly, highly, highly recommend that you have an epidural, because it helped me so much. First of all, when they gave me the epidural, it was not bad at all. The nurse who was there was holding on to my shoulders, and I was like resting my head against her head, and it was just so easy. As long as you just don't look at whatever they're about to put in there, which I never looked at, you'll be fine. Just don't psych yourself out. Just talk to the nurse, talk to whoever while they're doing it, and it doesn't hurt. Nothing hurts about it at all. I didn't feel it. It just felt like getting a shot in your back really fast, and then nothing. It just took a while for him to get it in there, but other than that, it was fine. And after that, it started to work almost immediately. And one thing I didn't know about epidurals is that it also makes you kind of loopy, like high, kind of. So I was feeling pretty good after that. I wasn't upset. My legs went numb. Everything was numb, and we laid there for a few hours. And every maybe 2 or 3 hours, someone would come in and check and see how dilated I was. Oh, another thing with epidural is, like, oh, he's crying. Alright, I'll be back. I'll finish in a minute. Okay, that was a false alarm. He wasn't crying. Okay, another thing with the epidural is that you think that you feel numb, like you feel like you don't even have legs, but you can totally move your legs. If you touch your legs, you still feel it. It just feels painless. It doesn't feel like your foot's asleep, which is what I kind of thought it would feel like. Your foot's asleep, but it's not that aggravating like that. It was different. So every couple hours they'd come check to see how dilated I was, and every time they checked, I was maybe 1 centimeter more. And so finally, and what I also realized is that contractions don't really matter. They'll monitor your contractions, but all that really matters when you're in labor is how dilated you are. It doesn't matter if my contractions were like 2 minutes apart, 30 seconds apart, and they're just going. They were really strong contractions, and I didn't feel them at all. But you could be having the closest contractions. It doesn't really matter at all. Just if you're dilated. Maybe like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they broke my water to kind of start labor along to make contractions come faster, which they did. It was just waiting. We just waited. Matt slept a little bit. I didn't sleep at all. Finally, like around 8 or 7 o'clock, I was 9 and something centimeters dilated, 7 p.m. that night. I guess it was time for me to push. So pushing was really, really, really hard for me. First of all, they turned my epidural down. It was at a level 10. They turned it down to a level 8 so that I could feel the contractions and know when to push. That made it really tough to push because I was in pain. I started pushing. First they taught me how to push. They would count to 8 or count to 8 and tell you to push like you're using the bathroom, like you're having a bowel movement, which I did, and it was really tough. My cat, sorry. I pushed a lot, and it was so discouraging because the doctors, after I pushed, they looked so disappointed in me. I would push so hard, like as hard as I possibly could, and they tell you can only push with one breath, like you have to hold your breath and push. So every time I pushed as hard as I could, they just looked so like, oh, and they would kind of just, all right, walk away, and it would just be me and Matt standing there. I'd be like, oh, okay, so I guess we need to wait for another contraction, and then like another contraction would come, and me and Matt would just be sitting there, like, okay, I guess we should push. Matt would be like, okay, 1, 2, and then they would be like, oh yeah, and they would be at the other side of the room, and they would come over and help me again. So I was kind of disappointed in them, but did that for about 2 hours, and I was no sleep from the night before. I was going on like 24 hours of no sleep. So that's what made it really hard to push. The pressure was hurting. It really, really hurts to push. For me, it does. Some people say it doesn't hurt, but it did for me. One thing I would highly, highly, highly recommend would be some kind of fan. I had my husband fanning me like crazy with like a folder because I had just sweat pouring down my face. So during the pushing and during contractions, in classes they teach your husband ways to calm you down, to massage you. I did not want to be touched when I was going through that. I felt so irritated. I just wanted to like close my eyes and just breathe and get through it, and just like scrunch up my face and just get through it. So I highly, highly recommend some kind of fan if you can get like a little, because Matt was getting worn out. He was like for minutes at a time, like 10 minutes at a time. I thought that once you have an epidural, even pushing wouldn't hurt. You just push as hard as you could, and he would come out, and it would be just a happy, good time. My cat. So I pushed for about 2 hours, and during the first couple pushes, they could see his head already. They could open you, like, look in there, and they're like, oh, he has hair, and I lost it. I just cried and cried and cried because then it became a reality, like, wow, we're about to really have a baby. Before, it's all about pregnancy and contractions and how dilated are you, and give me epidural, and so somebody finally reminds you that the baby's about to come out and he has hair, like, I just cried. I thought, wow, I'm really close. I won't have to push too long, but I ended up pushing 2 more hours. Towards the end, I thought that they would be like, okay, you're getting close, just a couple more pushes and he's out, but they never said that. So I felt really, really hopeless, and finally the room filled up with like 10, 15 people, students that were watching, and so they whipped out all these tools, and so I got him out, pushed him out, and it was really the most amazing experience. After the pushing was over, they put him on top of me on my stomach, and he was all like gooey and bloody and screaming and cute. Oh, they ended up giving me an episiotomy, and when they were doing that, they cut his head, like the back of his head, sliced the back of his head too. So for a while, he had a pretty big scab on the back of his head, but they apologized. But it was pretty amazing to actually see the baby, and then they stitched me up for a while and washed him off and all that good stuff. After the labor was over, I could not stop talking about how much I hated it and how terrible it was to the doctors. I was like, thank you so much for everything, but that was horrible. And they're like, yeah. Like, I don't know if I could ever do that again, because I did not handle it well. I think that if I got more sleep, maybe it would have worked out better for me. I could have pushed better. Yep. So that was my labor and delivery story. It was like 18 hours of labor waiting. Good luck to you guys. Good luck to you guys. it's worth it. It really is worth it, but I'm so glad I don't have to do that again. Oh, and it's pretty amazing that your stomach goes down like immediately. But I'll do a video about postpartum in just a minute. Alright, bye guys.